Now we'll go live with Congressman Cole and hear a few words about the latest in Washington and in the 4th District. Congressman?
Sarah, thank you very much, and to all of you that are on the call, thank you very much for taking the time to listen and hopefully participate. We schedule these things quite a ways out, at least internally, and then announce them. And I certainly had no idea when we scheduled this, and I'm sure nobody on the staff did, that I'd be talking to you the night that the last American military flight from Kabul had departed. So let's begin by talking about Afghanistan, because I think that's pretty topical, and then talk about what's actually happening in Washington this year and likely to happen between now and the end of the year. There are a lot of different opinions about the merits of the war in Afghanistan. Clearly, we went there after 9/11 because the mastermind of the attack, Osama bin Laden, or the head of Al-Qaeda at least, was there. We had demanded that the Taliban regime that ran the country turn him over to us. They refused to do that. President Bush responded. We had two objectives. One was to get Osama bin Laden. That took us a lot longer than we hoped and thought it would. It took almost 10 years, and we found him in Pakistan, right next door. He barely escaped in the initial months of the war and then stayed hidden after that. And the second reason we went there was not to build a Jeffersonian democracy, but to make sure that this unsecured space, which was being used by literally dozens of different terrorist organizations, never become a platform to attack the United States from. And we hoped over time that a government would develop in Afghanistan that could police its own borders. In other words, could do that for us. We weren't able to do that, but we were able to buy 20 years worth of security for our own country. We certainly, any life you lose is terrible. It's worth noting in 20 years we lost fewer lives than we lost on 9/11 in a 20-year period. We had been able to reduce the size of our commitment down to a few thousand troops. We had complete air supremacy, and honestly, in terms of managing the conflict, what we were doing, I would argue, was working. But I would tell you, there's obviously people that have a very different point of view, and the last three presidents have tried in different ways at different times to try and exit from Afghanistan. So that includes both Democrats and Republicans. I didn't think that was the right decision. I thought, again, if we could keep the place stable with 5,000 to 7,000 troops, air supremacy, no Americans in combat, Afghans doing most of the fighting, that honestly over time we might well prevail. In any event, we'd be secure. But again, decision was made not to do that. Personally, I think it's a decision we'll regret at some point, because there's no question Afghanistan is now going to be a mecca, for terror. I shouldn't use the word mecca. It's going to be the focal point for terrorists all over the world. They're going to be able to go there. They're going to be able to train. The Taliban is sympathetic to them. It's going to, in my view, impose a almost medieval Islamic fundamentalist regime that's going to be very oppressive to minorities, certainly to girls and women, and it's going to be a welcoming place for terrorist groups that plot against the United States. So, I'm not sure we are safer today than we were when we had a military presence. No matter where you are on the merits of having gone there or stayed as long as we did, and I would grant there's different points of view on that. I think most people would say that the manner of our withdrawal really was incredibly botched and mismanaged. That doesn't mean that the people on the ground, particularly the 13 brave Americans that we lost last Thursday, didn't do their jobs. They did a great job. We put them in an impossible situation. I think we put them in a bad situation was one, we withdrew our military first. That was a big mistake. They should be the last people coming out. Second, we prematurely surrendered a lot of valuable real estate, like Bagram Air Force Base, most notably. Third, the State Department was incredibly slow in expediting visas for Afghan interpreters, contractors, people that had helped us in an intelligence sense. That's picked up a lot in the last couple of weeks. I'll give them credit for that, but that should have started many months ago, particularly if your plan was to exit, as was announced on September 11th. An incredible choice of dates by the administration. So I have to say, I think this has been mismanaged, although, again, the people on the ground did the best they could. They're in the middle of a city. They're surrounded by hostile forces. It's a pretty easy place to have a suicide bomber, as we now see, or to lob in grenades and what have you. And we left with some Americans still on the ground. We don't know how many. The Secretary of State is on the air right now, and maybe he'll have a more precise number, but best estimates I've seen is someplace between at least 200 and 300 Americans that wanted to leave are still there. There are also tens of thousands of Afghans that we know were, after the initial few days of this, being turned away at Taliban checkpoints that want to get out of the country. There will be certainly diplomatic efforts to get those Americans out of the country and to try and bring international pressure to bear on the Taliban regime to allow Afghans who no longer want to stay in a Taliban-ruled Afghanistan the opportunity to leave the country. How successful that will be is anybody's guess. Mine is probably not very successful where the Afghans themselves are concerned, and it's going to be very risky and dicey for the Americans that are still on ground. Although, again, I have no doubt that if anything we know happens to them, we would respond forcefully and quickly, as we have in the last couple of days in response to the horrific suicide bomber attack on our folks. Anybody that thinks we're done with Afghanistan, I think, is probably mistaken. Again, I expect terrorists to constitute themselves there. I expect us to have to strike back into there. I hope I'm wrong. I would love to be wrong about that. For what it's worth noting, though, my opinion is shared by Leon Panetta, the former Obama Secretary of Defense and former head of the CIA, who thinks we will have to go back in some form or fashion. I heard this put by somebody on one of the Sunday shows: just because we quit fighting terrorist groups in Afghanistan doesn't mean they're going to quit fighting us. And quite the opposite. I think they're emboldened. I think other enemies around the world are also emboldened. I think the Chinese, the Russians, the North Koreans, the Iranians, others who are more dangerous adversaries will look at this and wonder whether or not the United States has the will and the resolve to keep its commitments. And I think some of our allies, and a lot of our allies, went with us to Afghanistan. There were actually more NATO troops on ground when President Biden announced his decision to be out by the end of the summer. And there were Americans by quite a bit. And we sort of took our allies by surprise. And, they've been scrambling to get not only their own people out, but they too had Afghan interpreters and Afghan supporters and Afghan contractors. And so they've been working with us, but there's some pretty upset allies of the United States who feel like the manner in which we left was haphazard, dangerous, put them at danger, put their people at danger, put our own credibility, which their security rests on, at danger as well. So, again, Congress will be dealing this when we come back. We'll have hearings. Frankly, there are a lot of critics of the manner in which this was done on both sides of the aisle, and I suspect there'll be a lot of soul searching, and that'll be one of the major issues Congress deals with, as well as trying to exert diplomatic pressure to make sure all Americans get out, that as many Afghans that cast their lot with the United States as possible get out, and that we don't allow terrorists that can strike from Afghanistan to congregate there again. Talk about the rest of the things that Congress was doing, and let me begin by talking a little bit about what happened last year. And I'll say something counterintuitive. 2020 was a very, very tough year for the country. We had, obviously, the year began with an impeachment effort. We had very bitter and tough election. We had, much more importantly, the COVID disaster, which killed hundreds of thousands of Americans and disrupted our economy. I would tell you that after the first impeachment attempt, and beginning about the time of the COVID outbreak in February of 2020, Congress actually worked surprisingly well for the year. It passed 5 COVID relief bills totaling over $4 trillion. The entire federal budget on an annual basis is about 4.4. All the spending bills, and you've heard plenty of times about government shutdowns and what have you, all got passed. All this was done with huge bipartisan majorities. Congress passed the Defense Authorization Act as well for the 60th straight year. Actually worked together very well. And after the election, Congress, came back. In a sense, you would think the bipartisanship would continue, if only out of necessity. We have the most narrowly divided Congress today that we've had since 1884. We have a 50-50 Senate. We have a United States House of 435 members that on any given day, if it's a party line vote, 4 Democrats defect, then the Democrats lose. So very narrow. You had a new president, President Biden, that had a reputation, a record, and ran on bipartisanship. So you would have thought there would be some working together. And in a few areas there has been. But I think Democrats also, because they have the presidency, the Senate, and the House, are under enormous pressure from their own base. And this would be true if it were Republicans. We were in 2017 and 18 to do big things. So right out of the bat, the beginning of the year, when there could have been a compromised final COVID relief bill of $600 to $800 billion, a lot of money, Democrats chose to go $1.9 billion, include a lot of things that were not COVID related, use an arcane budget procedure. Although, again, to be fair, Republicans have used it themselves and passed the tax cut bill in 2017. And they passed on a party line vote a $1.9 trillion bill. Since then, they've continued to work toward, achieving really historic changes on really small majorities, and it's been tough sledding. Congress has 3 big items that it will deal with between now and the end of the year. The first, and probably the most promising, is a bipartisan infrastructure bill that was negotiated in the Senate by a group, self-appointed group, about 15 senators. It didn't go through the normal committee process. It is genuinely the biggest infrastructure bill in a generation, about $1.2 trillion spread over 8 years. Lots of money for roads, bridges, waterways, ports. Also some things I would consider more questionable, like electric charging stations, something that the private sector in the past, when we built the original sort of gasoline stations across the country, was responsible for. And we were told it's fully paid for. It's not. The Congressional Budget Office says it's at least $256 billion short of being paid for. But it still came out of the Senate 69 to 30. Neither of our senators voted for it. I think they were both concerned about the deficit and some of the questionable programs attached to it. But 19 Republicans and all 50 Democrats voted for it. And if it's put on the floor of the House, which it could have been as early as last week, it will pass. And that would be a big bipartisan victory, I guess, for the president. However, Speaker Pelosi decided rather than putting it on the floor, she would use it as a weapon to force her party to vote for a much larger bill, a $3.5 trillion bill called the Human Infrastructure Bill. Has a lot of things in it that hasn't been written yet. It's being written right now. We sort of know the outline of it because there's been a couple of budget resolutions that specified the outlines. That's not the same as the bill. But what we know about the bill is it's been $3.5 trillion over about a decade. It will have some things in it that are pretty popular. Universal pre-K education for 4 and 5-year-olds, free community college, elder care. It will be expensive. It will call to increase the corporate tax rate from 21 to 28%, a 33% increase. About 70% of that will be paid by average Americans in the form of higher taxes because corporations simply pass on the cost of their tax bill to the consumer. There'll also be much higher estate taxes. That matters if you're a small business person, or more importantly, probably even than that, as a farmer or rancher trying to pass on your estate to the next generation. Be higher capital gains taxes for people that already make a substantial amount of money through capital gains. There'll also be an end to a number of tax breaks that were timed that Republicans promised to extend. Democrats have decided not to. That will hit people that do make less than $400,000 a year. So there's a big revenue component to this. We don't know whether that can pass or not. We know to pass in the Senate, it will take all 50 Democrats. A couple of them at least have said they can be for a tax increase, but not this big a tax increase, or they can be for spending increases, but not this big. So that may change things. In the House, we had a rebellion of 9 moderate Democrats who wanted to pass the bipartisan infrastructure bill and said they were not prepared at that point, at least, to commit to the $3.5 trillion. There will not be any Republican votes for the $3.5 trillion bill, just not possible. So that'll be the second item that Congress deals with. The third is what's called the normal appropriations process. Congress appropriates about $1.5 trillion a year. It doesn't appropriate the money for Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. Those come out of trust funds and existing tax revenue. But it does appropriate for defense and what most people think of as government. That has to be negotiated out between the two parties. The Democrats have been presenting bills, and it takes 60 votes in the Senate on appropriations bills. You can't do these through reconciliation. But they've increased domestic spending by 18%. That's after all this spending on COVID relief and the not fully funded infrastructure bill. They've held defense spending increases to 1%, which is an inflation-adjusted cut. And they've stripped out of all the appropriations bills pro-life protections that have been there for 45 and 50 years in some cases. The Hyde Amendment would be the most famous. It prevents federal funding for abortions other than in cases of rape, incest, and life of the mother. I would eliminate the Helms Amendment, which prohibits U.S. foreign aid from being used for abortions in foreign countries or funding population control organizations that are international in scope. We get rid of something called the Weldon Amendment, which says no doctor, nurse, or healthcare professional can be forced to perform an abortion if they have a moral objection. It doesn't say they can't do abortions. It just says nobody can make you do one. It's pretty important to religious hospitals, Catholic hospitals, people that have strong beliefs on this. It's a conscience protection measure. So anyway, those things have to be sorted out. We'll get to the end of September. We'll pass what's called a continuing resolution, which means it'll just keep things in place, and then we'll try to negotiate a bill. If we don't do that at the end of the year, you'll end up with what's called a year-long CR, which means government funding stays at the current levels. Unfortunately, that limits your ability to increase defense spending. It limits your ability to change the item to reflect changes in reality. The example I always use, if you bought 100 Abrams tanks last year because that's what the Army asked you to do, and they only need 65 this year, you would still have to buy 100. So it's a very cumbersome budget tool. You really want a negotiated budget with give and take, and where you really adapt the budget to what the realities of governing are in a given year. So those are the three big issues in front of Congress that a lot of energy will be spent on. Plus, I think Afghanistan will be a continuing focus now for several months at the minimum as we work to try and get every American out of there diplomatically and as many people as we can. And, again, I hope I'm wrong, but I think we'll see a stronger challenge from terrorists and from our adversaries in the months and a couple of years ahead. I think they'll want to test the Biden administration. So, again, that's probably a lot more than people wanted to hear. I'm happy to answer questions on these or any other items that any of you care to bring up in the course of the question and answer session. So, Sarah, if we can, why don't we go to that?
Sure. Well, again, if you would like to ask a question, just press *3 on your telephone. And if you would like to opt into future calls like this, just press 1. Our first question comes from Sheila from Midwest City.
Hey, Sheila, this is Tom. How are you?
I am well. Thank you for asking. And you?
Sure. Very good, thank you.
My question is Oklahoma doing anything to help mitigate the crisis at the border, at Texas border?
Well, to be fair to Oklahoma, it's not the responsibility of our state government to do that. I don't know. I don't think we have sent National Guard people down. A few states have sent down some, but I do not believe that we have. But again, to be fair, that's not our responsibility here as a state government. This is, in my view, very strictly a failure of the Biden administration. The president came in, changed a lot of policies that were working. We do have a genuine crisis at the border. This is the time of year when normally the number of illegal entries coming into the country goes down. Instead, it's going up. And we've more than tripled, I think, drug seizures as well, and there's a lot of human trafficking involved. So it's one of the great debacles, I think, that we've seen where, again, an incoming administration changed policies and made things a lot worse. But, we're trying to do some things. The president in his budget and the Democrats in the bills they've passed so far has not offered a single dollar more for border security. As you know, the efforts to build the wall or the fence or physical barriers were suspended, even though the money is there. In some cases, has been appropriated and directed, but contractors were stopped in their work. So I would argue this administration and the majority in Congress is abdicating its duties at the border.
All right, we'll go ahead and move on to our next question. But again, if you would like to ask a question, just press *3. Our next question is from Matthew from Norman.
Matthew, this is Tom. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you, sir. How are you?
Very good, thanks.
Hi. I'm a younger individual. I was actually kind of curious, what is something like myself as an individual, or what can we in Oklahoma do to help with the situation in Afghanistan? It just seems kind of way out of hand. If anything, I really want to see if there's anything we could do against the current administration and, hold them liable to their actions.
Well, there will be there'll be some interesting hearings in terms of individual action. Number one, letting your member know you live in Norman. I don't know if you're registered to vote there, but you've just registered your opinion with me, of which I share yours. And we'll be doing everything we can on that score. If you're registered to vote someplace else, I'm sure that that congressman or woman would be interested in knowing that. It's ditto your United States senators. Again, I'm always loath to. There are a number of groups that do good work trying to get people out. One of them is the International Rescue Commission, which tries to help refugees all over the world. We'll be making a special effort here. There are other groups. You can go to websites and find them out and contacting some of those people. But I think advocacy is the most important thing right now. We did get, over the weekend, 100 countries sign an agreement. Interestingly, the Chinese and Russians were not amongst them, telling the Taliban that since they were ruling Afghanistan, they would be held responsible if Afghans and Americans and other foreign nationals wanting to leave weren't given the opportunity to do that. And we do know there are hundreds of foreign nationals, probably 200 to 300 Americans, that want out of there. There are tens of thousands of Afghans that want out of there, that are desperately afraid of what's going to happen to them and their families. And once the international spotlight is off and they're left to the tender mercies of the Taliban. So anything you can do to educate people about that, advocate, get them to also contact members of Congress. And again, this is, while it has a partisan tilt, I think Republicans are probably more critical on average of the president. There are lots of Democrats, particularly lots of veterans. I was listening to Seth Moulton, who, with a Republican colleague, Peter Mayer of Michigan. Moulton is from Massachusetts. He did 4 combat tours in Afghanistan. He's a good Democrat by any stretch of the imagination. He's generally very supportive of President Biden, but he called this evacuation procedure, quote, absurd, unquote, and terribly botched and mismanaged. There are a lot of other Democrats that think that. So I think there's going to be a lot of pushback on the administration. I also think the Democratic leadership in Congress will try and tamp that down, but there will be hearings, and hopefully some people are held to account for, really, in my view, terrible planning and execution. And again, that does not fall on the soldiers on the ground. They did the best they could with the orders that they had. Particularly these 13 that died, they went into harm's way to rescue their fellow Americans and rescue people that had sided with us and put their faith in us. And they all died heroes, and that's something that the president made that point, and all of us can agree on that point. But it doesn't mean this was a well-planned, well-executed withdrawal. It was anything but, and the people on the ground paid a price. The people in Afghanistan paid a price, and I'm sad to say I think the country will pay a price in the months and years ahead.
All right, we'll go ahead and move on to our next question, but if you would like to ask a question, just press star 3. Our next question is from James from Ada.
Jane, this is Tom. How are you?
Hi, Tom. Yakuke, how are you today? Very good, thank you.
Very good, thank you.
Well, I'm just proud of our governor for all of the things that he's done from this COVID crisis, and all this COVID stuff all really happens, at the ground zero level, and he's just done a superlative job, and so has Governor Barton over in the Choctaws, and I just want to, they've all done a good job, and I know some of the other tribes have done as well too. So I hope you'll give a good shout out to them when he comes around and asks how Oklahoma did, because the governor really stepped up.
Yeah, Governor Anatobi, I think, and again, a lot of our tribal leaders, most Oklahomans aren't aware of this, but for instance, I was actually just last week or the week before, I guess, at the Emergency Vaccination Center, Emergency Response Center, Chickasaws have in Ada. They've done over 65,000 vaccines, and anybody, if you show up, you don't have to be Chickasaw, you don't have to be Native American. They are trying to vaccinate as many people as possible, and the Choctaws, Chief Batten, Chief Hoskins with the Cherokees, a lot of the tribes have done that. Oklahoma actually got extra vaccine, and money because of tribal health care systems. There's a federal obligation to help, and they've been very generous. And so in the early stages of the vaccination, we were actually leading we were one of the top 10 states in the country. We've fallen off a little, not because the vaccines aren't available, but simply I think we got a little bit complacent. I don't mean to nag anybody here, but let me make it crystal clear. I've been vaccinated. I've had my family vaccinated. I hope you'll get vaccinated too. I've spent some time in the last time when we've been home at hospitals and nursing homes, and I can tell you it's pretty heartbreaking to go to an intensive care unit, and I have, or to an emergency unit, and see and talk to doctors and nurses who are exhausted, who are doing amazing work. The number of people coming in with this, with COVID, and almost all of them haven't been vaccinated. I mean, over 90% of the people that have died since May, I think 97% of COVID were unvaccinated. And almost anybody you meet in an ICU unit that has it, that wasn't vaccinated, will tell you, I wish I'd gotten the vaccination. I put it off, or I didn't think it would happen to me. So please do that. I actually hosted a Zoom conference today. It was a discussion with the Oklahoma Health Commissioner, Commissioner Fry, and some officials, old friends of mine at the Oklahoma City, Oklahoma County Health Department, Phil Maytubby and Brad Bowling, and these are all frontline healthcare officials here in Oklahoma, and all doing, by the way, a very fine job. But they'll tell you, please get the vaccine, and they'll work with you, make it available to you. But it's the best way to protect yourself and your family and your friends and neighbors. But you're right, our tribes have done a great job in assisting the overall state effort, and very proud of them. But most of all, like all of us, I'm really proud of our doctors, our nurses, our healthcare professionals, our hospitals. They are working overtime, but I will tell you, they're pretty discouraged when they're trying to save people or help people that come in that it didn't have to happen had they gotten the vaccine. So please look into that. Check it out. If you got concerns, I would just recommend call your doctor, call your local hospital, talk to a local healthcare professional, and see what they tell you. And I'm almost certain the advice would be, please get the vaccine, and we'll try and help you get it as quickly as we can. It's free. It's not something that's going to cost you anything. And again, we have a lot of pharmacists out there that have done great jobs as well. You can talk to your local pharmacist, but please give it serious consideration.
All right, we'll go ahead and move on to our next question. But if you'd like to opt in to future calls like this, just press 1. Our next question is from Elizabeth, and she's from Oklahoma City.
Hey, Elizabeth, it's Tom. How are you?
I'm doing fine. How are you doing, Tom?
Good, thank you.
I know that you gave us a lot of information at the beginning of this meeting, and I'm very concerned about the people that are left in Afghanistan, the American citizens over there, as well as those that helped us. And I know that they're stranded over there. There's no way for them to get out. I want to know, is there a way that they can get out? Is there something going on where they do have an exit plan?
Well, as General McKenzie, who was in charge of the military phase of the evacuation, said, the military part of the effort is over. The diplomatic effort is about to begin. The Taliban has publicly committed that any American and any green card visa holder, that, by the way, is not everybody that helped us, but it's tens of, I think at least 20,000, will be able to get out. Now, we have conflicting reports as to whether people fitting those descriptions were allowed to get to the airport gates in Kabul. In the initial days they were, and then the Taliban, seeing how great the flow was, started clamping down and not letting people come. So I think we'll be able to muster a lot of pressure to get people out. But again, this is a little bit different than what the president promised. He said that everybody would get out. We wouldn't leave anybody behind. Well, we clearly are leaving people behind. And now it's up to us to continue pressure on the Taliban and let them know we expect that to happen. We have a lot of leverage in the terms of control of national assets that they have. We still have enormous military capability, as we showed. We've left the airport operational so people can continue to fly out if they're allowed to fly out. But the next move is in their court. And as an American, I'm uncomfortable with that. I suspect most Americans are. I saw a poll yesterday where 85% of the American public, 84%, didn't want our military presence ended until every American came out. And over 70% that every Afghan that helped us came out. And there was not much difference or no difference between Republicans and Democrats on this issue. You can have a different opinion on the war, but you can't have, we don't have different opinions about the importance of getting Americans out and honoring that obligation. So all I can tell you is we're going to do everything we can in Congress. I think there will be bipartisan effort to keep the spotlight and the pressure on this, not from, the Nancy Pelosi's and the Chuck Schumers of the world, but there are a lot of Afghan and Iraqi veterans in Congress these days on both sides of the aisle. And again, we can disagree on a lot of issues. I've seen very little disagreement between average members on this issue. They want to make sure every American comes out safe. They expect us to use every diplomatic weapon we have, or if we had to, military force to go back in and get them out. But, you just can't look at not having sped up the evacuation back in March when I think the announcement was made we were going to get out, not having, kept the military on ground, but having to bring them back in greater numbers, surrendering things like Bagram Air Force Base before you've got all your people out. That's just nuts. That's just poor planning in my view. And Congress really ought to look at that and really ought to hold people account that made those kind of recommendations and decisions. Again, we can disagree about a lot of things, but I find very few people that say this has been a well-planned and executed operation. I find lots that say the Americans on the ground did amazing things and ran amazing risks to help their fellow Americans get out and to help the Afghans who were supportive of us and other foreign nationals that worked with us to get out. So again, when I'm critical of people in Washington, D.C. that made decisions. I'm not critical of soldiers on the ground confronted with a very dangerous situation. When we had our largest loss of life in a single day since 2011, and the war was still pretty hot in 2011, 12, 13, 14. So that tells you, things certainly did not go as planned, and we put our soldiers in a very, very dangerous and difficult situation by not thinking through this process better and executing it, I think, differently and probably over a longer time frame.
All right, we'll go ahead and move on to our next question, but if you would like to ask a question, just press *3, and to opt into future calls, just press 1. Our next question comes from Luana, and she is from Lindsay.
Luana, this is Tom. How are you?
Oh, I'm fine. And you?
Very good, thank you.
Wonderful. Yes, I'd like to know if there's any way we can get our military equipment back. We, like you said, it was nuts to leave the air base intact, and I want that equipment back.
Well, I agree with you. I just don't think the Taliban's likely to give it back, and it's a real question of, we evidently we left the airport operational in Kabul, as we should have. We evidently disabled, or took away all our planes and military equipment there. But, vast amounts of this stuff was just turned over by the Afghan army as it surrendered. So they have billions of dollars worth of American military equipment. They're now the best armed terrorist group in the world by far, courtesy of the American taxpayer. And again, to me, this is, again, poor planning, poor execution. I will say this, I mean, I think the administration, even though evidently our intelligence and military people warned them there was a quote-unquote danger of a rapid collapse, did not believe it would collapse as quickly as it did. So I think they never thought they would be in a situation where, as they were evacuating out, Kabul itself was controlled by the Taliban. But there may be some ways that certain weapons we can destroy, but the vast amount of it is now in the possession of the enemy, and it's an enemy or a terrorist group that is not likely to give any of this back. From their standpoint, hey, we captured it on the field of battle, and we intend to keep it. And I think that's where we're at. So I'd be happy to listen to any suggestions, and if there are any that would work, I would certainly be supportive of that. But I think once they've got the equipment, the idea that they would give it back or there would be some easy way for us to force them to. Now, we control, there's over $9 billion worth of assets that the Afghan government has, the former government, inside the United States. There's money at the World Bank. There's other places where we can't exert some pressure and either, one, try to get compensated for it, or two, try to say you won't have access to this until we get some specified number of weapons back. But again, I would be it'd be disingenuous for me to tell you that I have a high hope that we're going to be able to do that.
All right, we'll go ahead and move on to our next question. But again, if you would like to ask a question, just press *3. Our next question is from Nancy from Lawton.
Nancy, this is Tom. How are you?
Hi, Tom. I met you a long time ago at one of the Burgess functions. I'm a veteran here in Lawton, and I would like to... Go ahead, sorry.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. I interrupted you.
No, go ahead. I am curious about the energy issues affecting Oklahoma. My parents have land up by Ponca City, and I see all of those wind turbines and also the wind turbines down here on the Slick Hills. And I know that the big corporations are buying the farmers and ranchers turbines now, but I don't really understand the issues and what's happening.
Well, I'm going to break them into several parts of this. In terms of oil and gas, we have an administration that's honestly pretty hostile to traditional oil and gas. I mean, one of President Biden's first orders was to suspend the Keystone Pipeline, which is crazy. The oil is still being pumped in Canada. It just has to come down by train and plane to refineries, or train and truck, to refineries in Louisiana. It's more expensive than the pipeline and more environmentally dangerous. President also suspended, exploration and production on federal lands, which is about 20% of the surface of the United States and a considerable part of our energy reserves. He's working to undo the production that was underway in the Alaska National Refuge, or the Arctic National Refuge in Alaska. So in the short term, strangely enough, that may help Oklahoma. We don't have a lot of federal lands here. It pushes oil and gas companies back to places like Oklahoma and Texas that are historically supportive of oil and gas production. The wind industry is one that the president does favor. It's a big industry in Oklahoma now, as you point out. It provides about 40% plus of the electricity in the state. It's actually pretty popular in most of rural Oklahoma. There's a lot of areas that don't have oil and gas, but can get royalty revenues when you build a turbine on somebody's land. It's like putting an oil well there. You've got to compensate them for that. So it's It's fairly popular in parts of rural Oklahoma, and it's pretty effective. So it's I think, part of the energy mix going forward. And again, we have major facilities in the 4th District. Only concern that I've ever really heard voiced about them is if they get too close to airways. We have a lot of major bases here. You have obviously airstrip at Fort Sill as well. But for the most part, those things can be negotiated and worked out. And so I think wind will stay part of Oklahoma's energy portfolio. We're like number 2 or 3 in the country. I think 2. I think we're right behind Texas in wind production. So but I also expect a pretty robust future for natural gas and oil as well in Oklahoma. So again, you have a hostile administration, but over 70% of the energy production in the country is carbon-based. That is oil, gas, coal. That's not going to change overnight or anytime soon. And the president himself, as gasoline prices started to go up, partly due to a recovering economy, partly due to some of his policies, pleaded with the Saudis to please pump more oil. That, to me, is crazy. We have more than enough oil and gas here. We don't want to become dependent on other countries again. We're finally energy independent in terms of North America. We should want to keep that. That's a big strategic advantage for the United States. And again, we can all continue to look at other forms of energy, but they've got to be practicable, and they've got to be reasonably priced so that they don't raise energy prices so high that the average person can't afford to drive a vehicle or heat and cool their home. Fortunately, I think, again, we have a robust energy sector in Oklahoma and a bright future, and we have a regulatory apparatus in our Corporation Commission that's broadly supportive of the industry, and same thing's true. Oklahomans have been broadly supportive of wind industry as well.
All right. I think we have time for 1 or 2 more questions. We're getting close to the end of our hour. But if you would like to opt into future calls like this, just press 1. Our next question comes from Debbie, and she's from Norman.
Hey, Debbie, this is Tom. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
Very good, thanks.
Tom, I wanted to ask you where we stand with the House Bill 4, I believe, the John Lewis federal voting bill. I understand that.
Well, go ahead. You finish your point. I'm sorry.
I understand that we passed it in the House last week, and I think that it's up for a vote this week in the Senate. Is that correct?
That's correct. Not this week in the Senate, but when they come back. The Senate's not in session right now, but it will come up fairly soon in September when they're back in session, probably more like the 3rd, 4th week of the month. I don't know if it'll come up immediately or not. It very narrowly passed the House. I voted against it. Matter of fact, there were no Republican votes for it, partly because it federalizes the election system. It literally, for instance, a number of states on their own have decided they want to present, if you go vote, they'd like you to present some sort of identification. 81% of the American people favor that. This would prohibit that. It puts in lots of practices. It basically gets in the way of the states regulating their own elections. Now, the federal government has broad power if civil rights are being violated. That is, obviously, if you try to do poll taxes or you try to discriminate against particular groups or things of that nature, you'd find yourself in court immediately with the federal government taking you to court or individuals taking you to court. Those protections, by the way, all still remain in the Voting Rights Act. But this is a Democratic effort, in my view, at overreach. There was no effort to negotiate with Republicans on this. So, again, I opposed it to get through in the Senate. Unless they can figure out some way to stick it in the reconciliation bill, which I don't think they can because it doesn't have anything to do with the budget. It would require 60 votes. I don't think they have 60 votes, so While it passed the House very narrowly, I think it's unlikely to pass the Senate.
All right. Well, we'll go ahead and move on to our next question. If you'd like to opt into future calls like this, just press 1, though. Our next question comes from Bruce from Mustang.
Hey, Bruce, it's Tom. How are you?
Fine. How are you?
Good.
I got a problem. I've been trying to sign up for Social Security and Medicare for the last 3 months, and they're telling me they're 3 and 4 months out every time I call them, and I can never get an appointment.
Well, getting appointments is tough, but I would recommend you call our office. I'd call the Norman office, which is the number is 405-329-6500. We have people here that work on these cases and specialize in them, and we'll try and help you get signed up as quickly as possible. You know, certainly no reason why they shouldn't be supportive. I don't know what the particular issue is, and we'd need you to get a sign-up privacy release so we could, work on the issue for you, but we'd be happy to try and help you get the benefit that you've earned.
Well, I just know that I'm retired, so I'm on a pension, and my pension insurance will drop me the 1st of October, and I've been trying to sign up for Medicare. And like I said, the first time I called, they told me they were that I'd get a call within a week, and the next time I called after about 2 weeks, they said it'd be about a week or so. I waited after a week and called back, and then they told me they were 3 and 4 months out, that they're just that far behind and they don't have any help. It's I don't understand why we're operating like this. I don't understand.
They shouldn't be operating like that. Signing up for Social Security and Medicare be one thing if you had a issue or complaint or something like that. I mean, again, I can't understand what the problem is on the basic sign up. Now, you're outside the normal sign-up period for Medicare, but we're coming up on that. There's kind of a window every year when that happens. And Social Security, unless there's, again, some issue I don't know about, should not be a problem. I'm assuming you're on Medicare, you'd have to be 65 or over or have some special disability. Social Security you can sign up for depending on how long you want to wait, as early as 62. Full check is at 66. If you wait to 70, it goes up. But again, those are decisions for you to make on your own. But if you'll call the office, we will certainly try and contact Social Security and work with you on your case.
All right. Well, we are near the end of our telephone town hall. I'm sorry we weren't able to get to all of your questions this evening, but you'll have the opportunity to leave a message and receive a call back from our office after Congressman Cole provides some final words. Congressman?
Sarah, thank you very much. First of all, thank all of you for taking the time to listen in. Again, we didn't deliberately schedule it for today, which was such a momentous day in terms of Afghanistan, and we'll be doing more of these, and as Sarah will no doubt tell you, there's opportunities if you want to sign up where we automatically contact you every time we do one of these. We'd be happy to do that. I would just ask you in this very difficult time to think of our men and women in the uniform in particular. You saw what 13 very brave Americans gave up this last week to try and get other Americans, literally rescue them in a dangerous situation, rescue people that, again, had allied themselves with us and get them out. Every single one of those young men and women was a volunteer. Every single one of them went into harm's way without any question, and every single one of them gave the ultimate sacrifice. And that's what our military does each and every day. And it's going through a kind of a tough time right now. And a lot of our veterans who served in Afghanistan in particular, but also Iraq, are going through a tough time watching this. If you know any of those people, please reach out and thank them for their service. Tell them it made a difference to you. It's made a difference to the safety of our country, and that we appreciate everything that they have done and no doubt will continue to do. And we pray for them and their families every day. And then if you are so inclined, do pray for the men and women that we lost, that we have another 15 or so that are wounded, various degrees of severity, but any wound is serious. And pray for them and their families as well, because again, very difficult time for the American military right now. And you know, critics can say what they want. We haven't had another 9/11 in almost 20 years, and that's because we've been on the offense, not the defense, against terrorists all over the world, and we've taken the war to them, not to us. And that's, again, thanks to men and women in uniform. You know a lot of them right here in Oklahoma. The Oklahoma National Guard has certainly been deployed multiple occasions. And again, of course, this district has great military installations at Tinker Air Force Base and Fort Sill, where we have Army artillery and Marine artillery at Fort Sill and infantry at Fort Sill, and in terms of basic training as well. And of course, we've got the most important air logistics center in the world, which also has 2,000 Navy personnel there. So pretty important facilities here, and a lot of those folks are going through tough times. So please reach out to them and thank them. And again, thank you. And if you've got individual concerns like our last caller, please let us know. We'll be trying to be happy to try and work with you on those. And certainly always value your opinion and your input on any issue in front of Congress, and would appreciate your advice and insight. So we'll look forward to having another one of these chats soon.